Their sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more. Now, where there is remission of these, there is no longer an offering for sin. Yeshua came and dealt with sin, finally, once and for all. It's been dealt with. There's nothing more that needs to be done, sacrificially speaking, at all. Yeshua accomplished that. Now, what does that mean? It means that you and I can now have a clean conscience. Our conscience can be cleared, knowing this great redemption that he has brought us. No longer do our past sins become our identity. That stuff is supposed to be, as far as the east is from the west, that's washed away. Every time you yourself, as you get into those traps, as you look at the sins you committed, that's not what the Father looks at. He looks at the righteousness that his Son's committed. And you need to possess this. We need to have this. You need to believe this. Because as I mentioned last week, the devil is coming for you. And he's going to come, and this is what he's going to tell you. The devil wants to make sure you never forget what God has forgotten. This is what he's doing, and he is so good at digging up your past, keeping your past on your head. The person that you were is the person you will always be. The worthless bum, no good drug addict, the drunk, this is all you will ever be. You are not a new creation in the Messiah, Yeshua. These are the filthy lies he comes at when you are, but you have to believe it. And with that said, we're going to continue on. Verse 19. Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Yeshua, because of this beautiful work that Yeshua did for us, because of the price he paid, the pain, the torture he went through, we can do the unthinkable. It's unthinkable. Think about the context of this statement. The statement's being made in the context, go back to 9 and into 10. The context made in Yom Kippur, that context, where the writer's very clear that you can't go into the Holy of Holies. It's restricted. No one can get in. Only the high priest can get in. And guess what? Only he can get in at one specific time of the year. Even he himself was restricted. He only gets to go in on Yom Kippur and under specific conditions. I mean, this is restricted access. And now he's coming on the scene and saying, have boldness to go where you haven't gone before. When I began to contemplate this reality, it changed my life. It changed the way I pray. It changed it all, because do you understand what the writer is actually commissioning us to do? How do we do that? How do we enter into the throne room? Through faith in Yeshua in prayer. This is how we enter into the throne room. We have the ability. Do you know the power that exists to be able to enter into that throne room? Do you understand what's afforded? We have the ability to come right before the God of all creation. His Son sitting at his right hand, and that's where you can come in and bring your deepest, darkest fears. Your thoughts, your heart. You can share your heart with him. Pour out your heart. The frustrations you're facing in life, the trials and tribulations, bring them to him. You have the ability to go to the throne room, and so many of us just aren't finding the time. We don't have the time to do this. This is the place where we make confession. This is the place where we get deliverance. If you want deliverance, you got to go to the throne room. Do you want healing? You have to go to the throne room. But we don't enter there because we don't believe. To help you appreciate this, I want to share a story with you. And hopefully by the end of the story, you'll have a little better perspective. It's the story of Queen Esther, and we're not going to look at the whole story. I'm just going to look at a very small part of the story. Before we dig into this, one thing that I want you to be aware of, that you may need to make special note of, and that is this. This story is it holds intense prophetic imagery. And I mean intense, where the characters of the stories are prophetic representations of people that would come, of people that would exist. For example, Mordecai is a prophetic template, a typology of that of Messiah Yeshua. Now, if you've never went through our Esther series, go through that. And it's an incredible revelation. Mordecai represents Yeshua. There's so many parallels and prophetic inferences in his life to the Lord. And then you look at Esther, who represents the people of God. She represents Israel as a whole. And then you have Haman, the embodiment of the Antichrist, the devil. And then you have King Ahasuerus. And King Ahasuerus is represented as the father. Now, as you go to chapter 4, right as you break in, Mordecai, he receives a decree. He sees that the kingdom has made a decree. The king has made a decree. It's by law, all the people of God are to be put to death. And of course, this happened through the scheming of Haman. And it's interesting. You want to get into the prophetic inferences? Well, here you go. There's a decree that Mordecai is holding that condemns them all to death, all the Jewish people. Do you know how that came into being? Because Haman, the accuser, Satan, came to the Lord and said, "O king, there are people who do not keep your laws. They don't keep your laws, and therefore they're not worthy to live." The king made the edict. They're to be put to death. Now, how fascinating is that? Because when you look at the law of God, the Torah, it has put every single person in this room to death. It condemns every one of us to death. That's a fact. So they've been sentenced to death. So he tears his clothes. He starts mourning. Now, Esther, who is in the king's palace, she catches wind of this. Now, she cares for Mordecai because Mordecai raised her as his own daughter, though he was her cousin. Her parents died very early on. So Esther really cares for Mordecai as a father. And she hears that this news comes to him that, you're Mordecai, he's mourning, he's weeping, he's torn his clothes. So she gives her servant Hattach, it gives him clothes. Go to Mordecai, find out what's going on. So the servant Hattach, he goes to Mordecai, and Mordecai tells him everything. In fact, Mordecai gives him a copy of the law and says, "Here you go. Here's your copy of the law. Take this back to Esther and tell her to go to the king and get us deliverance." This is what Mordecai commissions her to do. Esther sends Mordecai these words in response. Okay, she gets this from her servant, and then she sends this response. "All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that any man or woman who goes into" what? "The inner court to the king, who has not been called, has but one law: be put to death." All people are to be put to death, whoever that is. You have to be called. Now, do you see the symmetry? See, because under the old covenant, knowing and understanding the Holy of Holies, you don't get in unless you're called. Well, who was the only one that was called? The sons of Aaron. Only the sons of Aaron could go into the holy place, and only at a specific time. Everyone else who would try or to be attempted was to be put to death. And that you can read that in the Torah. So then we move on, verse 12. "So they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai told them to answer Esther, 'Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace any more than all the other Jews.'" In other words, Mordecai says, "You do not enter into the Holy of Holies. You will die. You're going to die." This is how critical it is to go before the king, to get into the Holy of Holies. Verse 14. "And if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And so it's funny. Esther says, "I'm not going." Mordecai responds, "You're going." Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So you look at all of the things that are happening in the story. We have an edict, a law that has condemned all the Jews to death. You have Mordecai, representative of Yeshua, actually telling her, "No, go into the inner court. Go in, a place that is not lawful for anyone to go. Go there." Okay? And then you have her fasting. Now, continuing on, we read this. Now, it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes, and what did she do? She stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. Now, isn't this interesting? So here you have Esther. We know she humbled herself before she went into the inner court because that's what fasting is. She has humbled herself. But when does she go? Specifically on the third day. Now, what significant event do we as believers in Yeshua know in regard to the third day? That was the day Yeshua rose from the grave. And that's where all the power and all the victory is. And that paved the way to allow us to actually go into the Holy of Holies. So the fact that this has happened on the third day, not coincidental.
Hey there, this is Mike at Corner Fringe Ministries. Thanks for watching our video. If you liked the video or it encouraged you, do us a favor. Hit the like button, don't forget to hit the share, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. Now, if you want to watch the rest of this video, hit the button here. And if you want to watch the rest of this series, you can check it out here. And don't forget, you can download the Corner Fringe Ministries app today on any of your Play stores. Thanks for joining us at Corner Fringe Ministries.